Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations 5 Questions video series. This episode will look into the sentiments of destination residents, how this is shaped by recent developments in this pandemic, and why this matters to tourism recovery. Taking us through this topic is Olivier Henry-Biabaud, founder of TCI Research. Now, Olivier founded TCI Research in 2010 as a way of combining his passion for travel with his 20 plus years of experience in research and data intelligence acquired in global companies. I last spoke to Olivier in October 2020 for a feature with the PATA Crisis Resource Center, where we discussed at length about his work in measuring host community sentiments and the indicators' value for destination managers and marketers. A link to that feature is included in the video description below, and again at the end of this episode. Welcome to the show, Olivier. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Karen. It's always a pleasure to meet you.
I've got 5 questions for you, and here's the first. Now, we last spoke in October, as I mentioned, where we discussed the results from your APAC analysis conducted in June 2020. At that point, despite the height of the pandemic still fresh on people's mind, surveyed residents across Seoul, Sydney, Shanghai, Bangkok, Tokyo, and Singapore were very supportive of tourism. Have resident sentiments changed between then and now? And, are there any surprises?
Well, our resident sentiment data show that across 40 plus destinations surveyed in a survey globally, during COVID era, the resident support is still quite strong and positive overall. We have an indicator which is a tourism phobia index, which kind of measure the share of residents who are just very unhappy with tourism or would like to stop tourism promotion. And it has to be kept below 10%. And in overall, globally, we have a 5% in average, and it's more or less in line with the pre-COVID situation. And still today, you will find 7 in 10 residents in all those cities who want the city to continue promoting to attract more visitors in the future. They are all, most of them, proud to see visitors coming back in the future to visit them, or would be happy to give tips to visitors. So the overall picture is positive. And having said that, we do see actually in a recent period the light erosion, particularly in cities who previously had problems with over-tourism. So tourism back, yes, but maybe not at any cost. And the people want to be tourism back under control, or let's say carefully reopening. People are really missing tourism. They are open to welcome visitors again. But their perception about tourism impacts on their life show a kind of greater sensitiveness and expectations towards really a more sustainable, more responsible growth. So it's a bit funny because today streets are empty and visitors, most residents are sad about it. They don't see people in the streets. But for sure, tomorrow they will be a bit less tolerant against over-tourism and crowding. Also because the concept of crowding is changing. If they see tomorrow, such as, maybe 50 tourists just lining to visit an attraction without any social distancing, it has a different meaning. So they will be more and more sensitive to the way visitors will behave and how they will living together with them as residents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What factors are likely driving current resident sentiments about tourism?
There are actually 3 main factors. The first is really the economy. There are economic crises all over the world, and nearly 80% of residents consider that tourism is really good for the local economy, and 70% would like tourism to be financially support, so it can help the local economy recover faster. So it's the economy is very much driving the sentiment. We see an increase in private rental support. And some of the people may express concern about tourism having an impact in the future on the cost of living. So economy is one. Sustainability is definitely driving the sentiment as well. If you look at what kind of problems tourism causes in the city as perceived by residents, you will find always cleanliness and garbage management ranked in the top 3 main problems caused by tourism. And of course, cleanliness today for residents has a very special meaning in COVID era, because it can be associated with sanitary safety risk. And eventually, if you ask people about how tourism impact in positive or negative, usually the environment is part of the lowest rated compared to economy, compared to the atmosphere in a city or the infrastructure. So sustainability is number 2. And then you have, of course, the COVID safety issue. And when you ask people about the type of travel segments they would like to see more or less in the future, the good news at the end of the day is that they're happy to see more of all segments: domestic segments, international visitors, business and MICE visitors, or even driven tourism is something they would like to see more. But when you compare, you see that maybe in the short term they would be happy to see more of domestic and international visitors. Part of them, and the population is actually divided, because part of them would like to have some sort of a maybe limitation in the short term for attracting international visitors. So there's a bit of schizophrenic attitude, because as residents, some of them may want to have a bit of limitation at first when reopening, but at the same time, the same people, for 70% of them, would like to travel again internationally as soon as they can. So that's the main driving factors today.
Okay, now we were talking about, you were telling me about the COVID situation, and we can see how the world is also divided on the role of COVID-19 vaccines on travel and tourism recovery. So we know one camp is pushing for compulsory vaccines before anyone is allowed to enter the country, while another camp is also finding compulsory vaccination discriminatory. So as national vaccine programs are being rolled out across the world, do you think resident sentiments will influence how government decide on vaccine rules for tourists? Are there governments already asking for such studies from TCI?
They do. Actually, it's a very complex issue. The governments today, they have a very hard job to do. And to a certain extent, they also are getting a bit schizophrenic, because they have, on the one hand, to protect their communities from the pandemic, while slowly reopening for tourism, as they know their residents, for 10, 20, sometimes 50% of them, they depend on tourism. So the majority of residents today, when we ask them for governments, they consider the city in overall as already proper COVID protocols in place to host visitors. And many of them are already, considering that mandatory testing on arrival or pre-departure is enough to welcome visitors in good conditions. But of course, vaccination running up and out over time will help fuel perceptions around safety. Feeling you are vaccinated as a resident, or people coming in are vaccinated, that will obviously fuel more trust and overall positivity. But all these concepts of travel corridors or communication around, okay, you guys from the UK, you are vaccinated more than average, so you are welcome in my country and you are on my welcome list, whereas maybe you people from Brazil, maybe you're not because you're not vaccinated, or you have a Brazilian variant with you. So, all these at the same time procure a sentiment of safety, but also a sentiment of discrimination. And as you know, most residents also travel, and they would not feel happy if they apply, if destinations would apply such kind of discriminatory type of criteria for welcoming them. So it's a very complex issue. We, particularly in Europe, there's a growing controversy about the vaccine passports, because at the same time it would trigger travel intention, but also somehow it's kind of putting a sort of discrimination.
Okay. How can understanding resident sentiments help government and tourism organizations shape their post-pandemic travel and tourism strategy?
There are at least, I think, 3 or 4 main reasons. The first, again, is economy. There's an economic crisis everywhere, so there's a need for jobs. So maybe this economic crisis is an opportunity for many cities to engage with a new generation of tourism professionals, which may have fresh new ideas to reinvent or to reactivate tourism in their own cities. So first of all, the economy. Then it's a matter of reputation. Residents' sentiment is really driving the reputation of places all over the world. And you mentioned, I think recently, a survey from Dragon Trade showing that the number one factor for Chinese to choose a destination will be the expected, welcome and friendliness from residents. So this reputation is a major driver of future recovery. people will not travel where they feel not welcome in the future. And then, and certainly not least, but the resident is really an integral part of the visitor experience. And it was already the case before, it will be the case even more after COVID. So there are huge opportunities for destinations to use residents as part of their recovery solution and not see them as part of a potential problem. We know from the survey that 60% of residents interviewed want to be more involved in tourism development in their place. And there is a need for reinventing a sort of a new definition of what is an immersive yet safe experience that can involve social interactions with communities. We know from other surveys, visitors will want to have that again, and residents as well. But in COVID era, you need to carefully manage that. So how, for example, do you plan as a city a craft factory visit for a French group in Bangkok tomorrow? What does it mean in COVID era? So residents will want to be part of it, and it's important to engage with them, and particularly to understand who are the supporters who can be more beneficial than just leaving the space for maybe a tiny fraction of your residents, like 5% who are activist residents protesting against tourism.
Okay, we spoke also about the Dragon Trails study before this session. So, while your resident sentiments index monitors and makes sense of resident sentiments towards tourists and tourism, do you think that the raging, Stop Asian Hate movement would trigger a need for governments and destination managers and marketers to also understand residents' sentiments towards tourists from a particular part of the world, and for them to manage and prevent potential racial issues?
Yeah, this Stop Asian Hate movement is kind of amazing. I mean, just in a few days, they have, we checked that this morning, but they have generated something like 20 millions of conversations on the social web, and it's been spread over 100+ countries in the world. Honestly, I don't think it's the role of a DMO or any tourism ministries to deal with racism issues in their population. It's not their job, but at the same time, there is no doubt, and all the data confirm that sustainable tourism development is certainly the best way, or one way, of alleviating racism, as long as visitors are showing respect to residents and to the places they visit. Then residents are showing respect to visitors, and particularly visitors from the long-haul markets. And in our survey, you will find maybe one people protesting. For one, you will find 10 who are supporting tourism and happy to see tourism from long-haul market coming back, and who don't want to see the borders closed and so on, or maybe expressing concerns about tourism disrespect. So part of the sustainability is not in hand of the DMO because of this, kind of racism growing a bit here and there. But the role of DMOs is clearly to inform and maybe to educate visitors about respecting the place, respecting the community, respecting the environment of the destination, and also on the other hand, to engage with local people so they really feel part of the tourism development, and then they can show respect to visitors. So the good old travel, enjoy, respect motto that the UNWTO was developing before COVID is really more valid than ever in this time, and that's one way of fighting the rise of discrimination, probably, in racism.
Okay, and that's all the questions I have for you, Olivier. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to share with you some, that's a very important issue. So thanks for this opportunity to share that.
Wonderful. And to everybody, take care and stay safe. We'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.